everybody okay? Okay, I'm now going to introduce Eimear Flynn, and I'm going to read out his story. I think it's really, really important to do that. Finding purpose through life's hardest moments. Eimear was diagnosed with primary breast cancer in December 2011 at the age of 45. She underwent a year of intensive treatment, including surgeries, chemotherapy, and radiotherapy, followed by 7 years of chemotherapy. At the time, she balanced a busy household with a vibrant professional life, enjoying evenings and weekends that were punctuated by music practice, attending sports, dinner parties with friends, and making plans for future travels. Their children were still in primary school, and when she was declared cured and discharged, they celebrated the milestone with gratitude and joy. However, life took another difficult turn. In early 2020, Eimear's husband was diagnosed with rapid form of motor neuron disease. Sadly, he was lost to them in May 2020 during the early days of COVID lockdown, an immense emotional challenge. Then, in January 2023, during a work trip, Eimear experienced severe pain and breathlessness. Medical investigations revealed bone mets, indicating that her breast cancer had returned, this time for good. Despite these setbacks, Eimear is grateful to be alive and well. She's fortunate to have access to excellent medical care and the opportunity to participate in a clinical trial aimed at advancing knowledge of advanced cancer. Her journey has taught her preciousness of time with loved ones, time in nature, time singing in her choir, time creating memories, and time to simply be. Today, Eimear has the privilege of working also with the Advanced Cancer Council to help improve cancer care in Ireland, with those of us living with advanced disease and those who follow in your footsteps. Her story is one of resilience, hope, and a commitment to making a difference, living fully and meaningfully with advanced cancer. So Eimear, I welcome you to the podium, and I would reiterate that her story is full of resilience, and she really is making a very meaningful difference. And once you hear what she's got to say, and obviously this is the study that you and Sean have worked very closely on, and are ready to talk about the next steps.
Hello everyone, thank you for the lovely introduction, Helen. I was just listening to Francis' story, and so much of that feels familiar, and I'm sure it does for everybody else in the room too. So it's really lovely to be here. I joined the Possibility Group a couple of months back, and many of you have come, some of you in person, and it's really lovely to be here today. But my job today is really more to share with you some of the deliberations that a small group of us got together in the spring. Some of our thoughts or considerations or deliberations, and really to get you involved and to get your thoughts and your insights into how we might take this forward, because it's really encouraging to hear from Claire and others that there's an awareness now that some new things need to be done for people with advanced cancer. And we'd love to be part of our conversation and to help shape that, because our needs are different, and it's only through chatting about it that we kind of really began to understand the differences a little bit more. So that's what I want to share with you today, the deliberations of that group. And it all starts with a fantastic piece of work that one of our member, Siobhan, who's with us today, did a couple of years ago. And for anybody who's not familiar with Siobhan's survey, basically Siobhan found herself diagnosed with primary breast cancer, and within a year, it was actually escalated to being that of metastasis. And in that time, she firsthand experienced how connected, organised, structured primary cancer holistic care is, and then just how disparate, disconnected, and really totally uncoordinated it turns out to be in advanced cancer care. And we'll talk about why that might be the case. And she thought, sure, that can't just be me. And so she joined a patient group of Cancer Trials Ireland, and with them championed a piece of research. Groundbreaking on a number of levels. Groundbreaking because it was the first time anybody had actually talked to people with advanced disease to figure out what they need. And groundbreaking because it was the first patient-led piece of research. And the reason that she was able to actually pursue that is that she had a background in medical research, and so she understood how to construct a survey that would be credible, that would be authoritative, and that actually could be shared with others. And this piece of research has been shared at American and European medical oncology conferences, and it was published in a journal called Breast in December of last year. So anybody who hasn't come across before, you're going to see a couple of posters around the room with some of the infographics with the detail that came out of that work, if you're interested in more detail. But for now, I'm just going to concentrate on with the principal recommendations. And the work that our little group of us from Pastor Big Group came together was trying to figure out, well, how do we turn this research into actions? Because there's lots of really, really good intent in the cancer care space, but turning it into hard actions is really hard. So how could we as a group inform that and pursue that and encourage that? Because some of the things that are being recommended are actually not rocket science, they're very straightforward. It's things like access to psycho-oncology. We've already talked about it, there's policy in it, but yet access seems to be a problem. Access to a medical social worker. How many of us have scratched our head thinking, oh my God, I've got my will. What else do I need to do? What about paperwork do I need to do? Access to a medically verified information. Our doctors want us to evolve in the conversations and in the decisions around our treatment, but where do we get the information to feel fully informed? Dr. Google aided. We all know that. Palliative care, that Kira mentioned earlier on, is a standard referral, not just as a, oh, why do you think you need that? But actually the standard part of our care. Access to our medical records, so that every time we go to a different specialist, we're not telling everybody the same thing over and over again. Why can't it be one source of the truth that everybody has visibility of the totality of what we're doing? So all these recommendations, very straightforward, you recognise all of them, but how to get them off this page and into something that can be actually actioned? And that was what we meant to look at. But when we dug deeper, we found out something even more interesting. Okay? Look at some of these numbers. They are compelling. 99% of people wanted access to medical records. 87% said they had a health issue, mental health issues. I suspect the 13% who didn't click on that one were probably being in a very optimistic mood. 83% want access to earlier palliative. 78% felt that they weren't sure what they could do to exercise. How could they exercise safely? 70% were spending 1 to 3 days per month in hospital. 76% needed information on complex menopause. 25% were turning up at A&E because their GPs didn't know what to do next. And 75% were genuinely worried about finances. These numbers are compelling. But have you spotted it? None of this is breast specific. Even though the study was on metastatic breast cancer patients, none of this is breast specific. So that gave us really heart, because we began to realise that if we can make progress on any of these items for metastatic breast cancer patients, it is totally replicable for anybody with advanced cancers. And they are in nice economies of scale. So when the cancer policy and when the Department of Health are trying to figure out how to support some of this, there is economies of scale by looking at advanced cancer in total and not just one individual modality. So that's the good news. But if back to today, if we were to summarise the situation today, I suspect you'll recognise this. We would say fantastic strides in holistic primary cancer care. But advanced cancer holistic care has just not kept pace. Individual pockets of excellence, no question. Some really, really caring professionals out there who are going above and beyond. But there's no national standards, so there's quite a degree of inconsistency right across the country. Absolutely caring medical professionals, and all of us put our faith and our heart and soul into our medical teams to make sure that they care for us medically. But they're often unaware of our non-medical needs. And actually, they don't have time to be aware of all of our non-medical needs. So we've got to solve that in a different way. The support services, interestingly, all exist. The dots just aren't joined, and the referrals are really inconsistent. And the National Cancer Strategy, we absolutely welcome the fact that there are national cancer strategies. It makes perfect sense that the early ones would be focused on prevention and on detection. But now what we're calling on is for the next one to have a strand or a program within it that begins to look in specific detail at the needs of advanced cancer patients. So we're calling you, Claire, with your colleagues to help advocate for that for us. And why is this happening? It's not happening because somebody's actively trying to frustrate things. It's simply happening because, as we heard from Francis's story, medical progress has been really fantastic. There are now new treatments that weren't in existence 10 years ago. So those of us with advanced disease are living longer for the most part. And so we need for policy to catch up, because policy just has not kept pace with medical progress. And the big issue here is that patients don't die from primary disease. The reality is we die from advanced disease. And so as a society, we have a responsibility now to begin looking at the needs of advanced cancer patients so that we can ensure that we live full lives for as long as possible. So what does that mean? I'll move this way so you guys can see the slides a little bit better. What does that mean? It means that actually quite a lot of things need to change. The first piece is awareness. There's poor awareness at a number of different levels. There's even poor awareness for us patients. How many of us actually were equipped post our discharge from primary care to recognise the symptoms of recurrence? There's fabulous resources on the HEC website for GPs to help them make referrals for primary disease. Same does not exist for advanced and recurrence. Society, as far as society is concerned, well, sure, haven't we done cancer? Is cancer ticked? Have we fixed that? Back to somebody's comment about you're almost nearly afraid to say that you've got cancer again. What do you think back? What did you do wrong? There's almost that guilt feeling around it. So there's an education and awareness piece that's absolutely required across the board. And usually to build awareness on something, it's really important to have some data and some insights to share. And that's what we're going to be doing here today, is gathering all of our collected experience and knowledge so that we can actually present some informed commentary to people who can really make a difference and can take this forward. It's actually scary in this day and age. I think Roseanne, you mentioned it when we had coffee earlier on. It's ridiculous in this day and age that we do not know how many people are living in Ireland with advanced cancer. Nobody knows that number. Okay? Isn't that crazy? And actually, until Siobhan did her research for us around the needs of advanced cancer patients, nobody ever asked. They might have asked individually, but they never asked in collective. So, thankfully, we have that information now. We know what's needed, and therefore we can take it forward. The third area is around treatment, and that is a combination of things around drug access and also trial access. We're going to be hearing from Dr. Michael McCarthy later, and he's certainly been very vocal on the radio in recent times around equitable access to drug treatments, because there's a big difference between the public and private system, and there are huge delays between drugs being approved at a European level and actually being made available in Ireland. We've got to speed that up. And on the trials, again, we're fortunate that Siobhan was invited to participate in a committee, the National Cancer Trials Oversight Committee, or Clinical Oversight Committee. So she's been able to represent our voice as advanced cancer patients. And they're due to actually publish a report in the next couple of weeks. It'll be really interesting to see what they have to say about advancing access to clinical trials. I'm super privileged to be actually on a clinical trial, but I know I'm one of a very, very small number of people who actually have that opportunity just yet. And then finally, on policy. And this is really the key one. Nothing is going to change unless it is in the national policy, unless it is fully funded, fully resourced. And I think what's really fascinating, Claire, and you'll hopefully hear this from others around the room today, is when you get to the advanced cancer state, actually what we've understood now is that we need something systemic. A program isn't going to have it because we don't have an end. One of the things we're going to talk about language later, people talk about the word survivorship, it's synonymous with primary cancer care. But actually, we haven't survived anything yet, and nor can we survive this thing. But we can certainly live well with it. So what we feel is that we really need something systemic. And in order for something to be systemic, the ideal would be that it would be part of the next cancer policy. So what we're lobbying for and what we're really pushing for is that there is a particular program within the next cancer policy. It's appropriate that it would be. Actually, the first one was all around prevention and early detection. The second one was about expanding primary care. So it's logical that this next one would actually have a focus for us as advanced cancer patients. So you heard talk of the advanced cancer parents. Who are we? Well, we actually tried to figure out what do we call ourselves. And we're a group of 9 or 10 people, many of whom are in this room, who met on a couple of Zoom calls over the course of the springtime. And were we a committee, were we a group, what were we? And in the end, we decided on the word council, because we realised actually that the superpower that we have is in sharing our lived experience, is providing counsel, as in COUNSEL, to the people who actually make a difference. So we coined the name Advanced Cancer Council. If anybody can come up with a better name, no problem, we're not ready to. But the bit we are ready to is what is our purpose. And we believe that actually the best contribution that we can make as a group is that we can partner with academics, with clinicians, with operators, with policymakers to advance the cause and care, the quality of care of advanced cancer patients in Ireland. And so today we're going to get you all involved. Today you are all part of the Advanced Cancer Council, and today we're going to spend time in four corners working on four particular themes that were kind of really big areas of conversation for ourselves. And you're all part of this council. And if anybody would like to get involved in a more direct way or on a specific item, we would absolutely welcome more members, because many of us will have to come and go from treatment. And so it'll be really important that we always have a quorum. So if anybody's interested, let Helen or Siobhan or I know, we would absolutely welcome your views at any stage. So let me share a little bit of the work that we did today, so you can see where our musings got to, and see do you agree, and see how you can help build on that in the room here today. So as I said to you, our goal was, how do we take the output from Siobhan's research, and not that it sits as a piece of wonderful research, how do we turn that into something that actually makes a difference to all of our lives? And the first thing we realised was, well, we're going to have to win attention. And that's not about being noisy, and it's not about being activist, but somehow we have to stand out, because there's lots and lots of worthy causes out there. So how do we get attention for our needs? The second thing we looked at was, let's not be another group who put up, here's a problem, okay? Because nobody wants to hear another problem. But can we begin to paint a picture of what good might look like, and actually help the policymakers and the operators to actually figure out what could be different and how we could make it happen? The third thing we did was to draw a picture of the patient journey. Could we describe to people what is it that happens to us when we go through this journey? And you're going to see in the delivery corner a couple of little schematics where we try to draw what is the patient journey today. And then if we're to fill in all the bits that we think are missing, what does that look like tomorrow? We'll ask you for your input on that later today too. Kira, you mentioned palliative earlier on, because we as a cohort know how important palliative is. But does everybody else know? People are scared of that word. Why? How do we get over that taboo? And then knowing all of that, who do we engage with? Who are the people who can actually make a difference? Because we as patients can't. And our first protocol has to be our own health and our families. But how do we inform the people who can actually do something? And then finally, why language matters. That's already come up today. The word survivorship, I didn't count it many times. It's already come up in the room. And to tell you that that was a word that really bothered us as a small group, and that hence we would like to spend some time with you later today thinking about what are the words that empower us, and what are the words that really cut us like a knife. Because if we are going to influence the tone of voice that is used around advanced cancer, we have to come up with the language, and it's not the same as for the primary cancer cohort. So, getting attention. We did loads of research. We were up to here with statistics. And then we picked out the few that we thought, okay, I'll make everybody wake up. So here's a few. Not meant to scare, but just here's some facts. 27 plus people die every day in Ireland. That's 27 people, 27 families, 27 communities, 27 whatever. It's 2.5 times the number of people who are dying of COVID at its peak. That wakes everybody up. Okay? So if anybody thought cancer was done, I'm sorry, it's not done. And we can't pretend it's done, because that's heading sense. We then look at the scale. Our numbers are large and growing. We have the second highest instance of new diagnoses in Europe. That's not a good look. Okay, it's fantastic that we're catching people early with diagnosis, they could be wrong, but our numbers are growing. So again, we cannot put our heads in the sand and just think this is going to go away, because if anything, it's getting bigger. 44,000 new diagnoses every single year, and most of us are living longer. So that means there are more and more people in this country who actually need to be serviced. And finally, then on progression. Really hard to get a precise number, but we're pretty confident that about 30% of breast cancer cases advance. And we can tell that from some work that was done in the North recently, and also some work that has been done in other jurisdictions. So that's about 3,500 people, but that's just breast. So now you begin to think about the people with other cancers. If you've said, okay, well, let's say all the other cancers together were the same as the breast. Now we're up to 7,000 people. It could be 10,000. Part of the issue we don't know. We've got to get a handle on it, but it's not small. I think that's the key thing. It's not small. So the second thing we began to look at is, can we put words on what good looks like? Because I can imagine the Minister for Health is fed up here about the problems. So can we help her understand what a good solution would look like? And again, interrogating the work that Siobhan did, we realised that if we think about it very simply as patients, what's our objective? We want to live as well as possible for as long as possible. Really not more complicated than that. And what does living as well as possible look like? Well, it looks like having conversations about prognosis early if we want to have them. Why do we want to have the conversations? It's so we can plan. It's not necessarily we can plan end of life, but when you plan holidays. I know there's at least one lady in this group who's been on fabulous holidays. I love the photograph on our group. But we want to be able to plan. We want to be able to plan how to use our time well, how to enjoy our lives and our families well. Access to psycho-oncology. We all have our few days and weeks and months, and we need help when those moments happen. And as Roseanne said, the last thing you want to do is try to figure out who do I talk to get help when you're in the depths of feeling miserable. You actually need to know that ahead of time. Access to complementary services, that could be dietetics, physio, occupational health, sexual guidance, all those kinds of things that help us live well. Access to a medical social worker, I mentioned you before. It's about how do I make a will? How do I make an EPA? Do I need to have an advanced healthcare directive? Who can guide me on how this works? Because again, you're so in a mist of treatment and appointments and scans that some of this stuff feels like an even bigger burden than it ordinarily is. Access to medically verified information, access to a specialist nurse, somebody you can call and get real-time answers. And all very achievable. There's nothing on there that does not exist. It's just not joined up. So how the heck do we join this up? But then also there has to be a win for the medical system. If the medical system is going to be improved to support our care, there needs to be something in it that actually makes sense for the medical system. And so we try to put words on, well, what does the medical system try to do? And we would say the medical system's objective is to deliver a high quality patient experience with efficient use of resources. And as taxpayers, we want the medical system to do exactly that, with efficient use of resources. So what does it look like? And again, looking at Siobhan's research, what we probably discovered was some of the inconsistencies could be tidied up very fast if we actually had some national standards and national guidance. If you think about leveraging all of the advanced cancers, the concept of living well with in advanced cancer clinics was coined. You'll see a little bit more about that later, because we'd love, that's not necessarily a building, but we'd love your input as to what that might look like. And then finally, professional development of our healthcare system, that we actually begin to educate and upskill some of the medical profession to actually be experts in advanced cancer care. So a lot of this is about education and organisation. Okay, again, it's not necessarily new, but it will take concerted effort to make a change. And it's back to this shift from survivorship only focus, which has become synonymous with primary care, to a quality of life and longevity of life focus for us as advanced cancer patients. So that's what we thought good would look like. We'd love your views on that over the course of the day. The third thing I said was the model. I'm not going to go through all the detail of these two models now. You can interrogate them later with the delivery team, and I will walk you through those. But essentially, we drew a picture of what was our experience as patients. So we either came in to the GP or to A&E, we got a diagnosis and we were referred to a medical oncologist who came up with a medical treatment plan. We might have had some radio-oncology, some inpatient, back to tests and review, and around that circle. We keep going around that circle forever. Interesting bit is the bit with pink here. This is all the stuff from Siobhan survey that's missing a standard. It's in there and out there, depending in some cases, but largely it's missing. So how do we plug some of that into a system that is already at capacity in many cases and is already really stretched? And this was the second drawing that we came up with, is what do we think it should look like in the future. So it's conceptual at this stage, but it really threw out an idea. This idea of advanced cancer clinics that would be complementary to our treatment clinics, so that as well as having a medical treatment plan, we would also have a living with advanced cancer plan. And that these two things would be interconnected. We're not asking our oncologists to know everything about our mental health or everything about our muscle in our back, in the back of our legs, but we do need something to help us with that. And that should be consistent with what the medical team want to do in terms of supporting us in our care. So we'd like to explore that advanced cancer clinic concept with you guys today and get your input on what should be in that, where should it be delivered, what should it look like. And then finally on palliative. We've really puzzled over this for a little while. And I suppose two things struck us. One, the word palliative means scary to us, with advanced cancer patients, because we know the power of palliative. But what we did realise was that sometimes it's scary for our clinicians. And we were trying to figure out why is it scary for our clinicians. Is it that if they bring up the word palliative, we're going to be afraid that they're giving up on us? Because I don't think that's the case. Because when we think of palliative, or the group thought of palliative, we were thinking, how do I make the most of my life? How do I control my pain? Because in fact, palliative care is phenomenal. Pain management, sleep management, all those kind of things. What options are available to me? What might my worst days look like? How do I prepare? So we recognise that conversations with palliative earlier in the system would be so much better. But how do we break that taboo with clinicians, and how do we start those conversations? So, where to start? We took the deliberations of our small group and we started some conversations. And what we'd love now is for you all to begin to develop the language and refine the thinking that will enable us to engage further in all of these groups. Because every single one of these groups has said, we get it, we want to help. And that's amazing. So on the data one, we know we need to upgrade the cancer registries to figure out how many of us there are, where are we? And so we've engaged with that group, that's the All Ireland Cancer Research Institute, because they are all over the power of data. And they've even put down, lots of designations as quality of data and standardization of data. So they're all over data, we understand the power of data, both for treatment and also for resourcing. And they're going to arrange a meeting for us with the two registries in the north and also in the south. So we can begin to have a conversation around how to upgrade the registry. Because if we're to wait for an IT system that's 10 years down the road, that's too late. We need to start thinking much more creatively and much sooner. We've also had conversations with the Society of Medical Oncologists, and in fact, Dr. Michael McCarthy is going to be with us in a little while. He's now the president of that, and he was incredibly open and helpful in conversation to us. And he's prepared to work with us to try and figure out, well, okay, how do we fill in some of those gaps in terms of referrals, and they will advocate for us as well when the new strategy is being developed. And we got in touch with the All Ireland Institute for Hospice and Palliative Care, and the HSC palliative team leads. The nice thing, or the good thing, is that actually there is actually an adult palliative national policy in this country, and they've just released an implementation plan. And the HSC palliative team are actually beginning to roll that out as e-learning modules. So anything that we can do to inform how some of those referrals might be refined, they're totally open to engaging with us. Then on awareness, platforms like today that Marie Keating Foundation have given us is phenomenal, because it gives us the opportunity to align our thinking, to refine our thinking, and to actually inform others. And the Cancer Society, we've been in touch with them as well, because they operate in the advocacy space. And what we recognise is actually who we need to advocate is probably the Oireachtas as well as the Department of Health. And so they will help us open doors and build an advocacy campaign around our cause. And then finally, the Minister for Health, the NCCP, the Cancer Policy Unit, these are all people that we need to be ready and able to engage. Help them understand our situation, give them informed, considered content so that they can actually do their job really well for us. So that's on the to-do list. And then finally on language. I think I mentioned the survivorship word already. The discharge was the other word. You really didn't like either of those two. So Cynthia and I will meet you a little bit later on to talk about language, because there are words that are helpful, there are words that are really hurtful. And what we're thinking is, in any advocacy campaign, what do we want to sound like? Do we want to sound aggressive? Do we want to sound sad? How do we want to sound? And what we realised was, actually, we want to balance the gravity of our situation with the fact that we get up in the morning with smiles on our faces and we're living our lives. And we need to convey that strength as well. So the concept here is that any campaign should emphasise our strength, our courage, our resilience, while we present that positive news to the world. The message should be that behind all of our smiles is a story of resilience, but also a real desire to keep going, to enjoy our time with our people, with our friends, with our family, go visit the world, whatever it is we want to do, we just go and do it. And the purpose of any campaign should be to encourage compassion from others, that they don't think cancer is done, that they don't think we've done something wrong, but rather they can actually advocate for us and help us live well for long. So that's the call to action. Look beyond the surface, see us for who we are, and help us to live better. Because we're still here. And that was a phrase we coined a number of times. We're still here, and we're still smiling, most of the time. So, as you have gathered, we have 4 corners. I'm going to introduce each one of them now individually. And then we're going to break up, and we're going to engage in conversation in smaller groups on each of these frameworks. One about data, because being counted matters. One is on delivery, because we want to try and see how do we smooth out our patient journey, because it ain't smooth right now. How do we optimise quality of life through engaging earlier with palliative? And how do we find our voice? How can we actually express our voice so that when we're engaging with policymakers, they understand us and they can help us effectively? So the first one's data. I've said this already, there's at least 3,500 of us, rounded up to 10,000 for advanced cancers in Ireland. It's as good a guess as any. Could be more. That's the scary bit. So yeah, we do need to upgrade the registries. And this concept of 5 years in children's discharge, I'm sorry, it's really fascinating to be here, and I didn't realise this until I got involved in this exercise, is that we're all counted when we have our primary diagnosis. So back in 2011, I was counted, as a for instance. But in 2018, when I was discharged, I'm done. I'm back in the system again, but I ain't in the numbers. Okay, so you're only in the numbers with advanced disease if it's a de novo metastasis diagnosis, which is crazy. So we got to get over that. But we in the room can't change the registry overnight. All we can do is nudge the people who can. But what we can do, Siobhan and Saoirse are going to facilitate a corner in a little while, is get the patient perspective. Why data matters to us, how we'd like our data collected, what we'd like our data used for, and I think we wouldn't like our data used for. So we would like your thought process around the data. If we're pushing for our data to be captured, we want to make sure that your voice is heard and what data is captured. And that will help inform dialogue with the registries and policy bodies. So that'll be corner number 1 in pink, over there. The second corner is here, delivery, right beside me. You'll see those little flow charts of the patient journey. Please interrogate them, pull them apart, fix them again, find out what's missing. Because we do honestly believe that some of these services can be delivered separately for advanced cancer patients and for primary. I think Marie Francis would be the point. You know, you've got a red flag in your head because you're the person nobody else wants to see. You know, the primary patients don't want to know that it could come back. And nor do we want to take that hope away from them, because many of them, they will get into remission. We all have that hope once. Let's not take it away from the others. But our headspace is different. And this is why systemic change is what's important rather than program change. Because we're living with this indefinitely. So it's not something that a 6-week program can fix. We might need a 6-week program. We might need to come back into it again and again. I think Roseanne made a good comment earlier on about, okay, I got access to this, but it was finite. What I really need is access to that once a year or twice a year, whatever it might actually be. So we've got to figure out a way of improving the guidelines, improving the referrals, and actually describing what she like. So, Anya and Roseanne are going to leave the delivery corner, and what we're going to love is your take on, have we got all the bits to the original story missing? Is there anything else we should add into that? Where should they be delivered? Should they be delivered close to home? Should they be delivered in the hospital? Should they be delivered in the hospital? Where should they be delivered? Are there differences between the cities and in rural towns? Question mark. So we love your take on that. Third area is palliative, over here. So this is really about breaking the taboo. How do we break the taboo? How do we have the conversations with our doctors, with our family, with our friends, that palliative is going, oh God, something different, because it's much bigger than that. So we've got to build awareness and educate on that. And meetings with the HC Village team have been fabulous, nothing short of fabulous. They totally get our plight. So, Hazel and Kira, both of whom have experience of palliative support, fabulous opportunity for you to engage with that and understand what's palliative to you. How would you have a conversation about palliative? What experiences might you have had that you're happy to share? What symptoms would you want support on? And what help would you need in being able to prompt those conversations that need to be had? And finally, you have Cynthia and myself in the fourth corner on language. We've got to find the words that we as a group are comfortable with being used about us. Okay? Very positive initial consultations with the Cancer Society around a possible campaign. They have taken to write brief notes in the style that would be expected of our office groups, and indeed to make introductions to us to our office groups, so that as well as the Department of Health, other office groups can be aware, and then when the Department of Health are putting ideas on the table, that there's actually a broader release. That's been very important. And as I said, having opportunities like today for Marie Keating or supporting what puts in is amazing. And we know that the Marie Keating Foundation will be there telling our story when the time comes as well on the cancer policy work. So what we'd like to do in this corner is capture what words and phrases help, what words and phrases hurt, and we'd love you to. So that's enough for me. We get to move forward. It's over to you, because we want your input. You are all part of the Advanced Cancer Council today. We value your input because it's your real experience. And we will gather up the information that we collect here today, and we will actively use that as relevant in dialogue with the various different bodies. And if there's something more substantial that comes out of our work today, we'll look at actually presenting that in a more substantial way. So what we're going to do is you'll notice on your badge, you've got a colour. So everybody can check what colour you are. And rather than everybody rushing to one corner at a time, what we're going to ask you to do is start with your colour. Okay, whatever your colour is, that's your start point. Yeah? So it should either be pink, yellow, blue, or purple. Whichever one of those you have. We're going to ask you to start with your colour. And Fiona, I think, is going to ring a bell. We're going to alert us 15 minutes. Yeah. And you'll get a chance to move. Don't move just yet, though. You get a chance to move to the next corner. And we just ask you to go around clockwise around the room. Okay, so I've numbered them here, so I've numbered 3 ones. So if you start at number 2, you go 3, then 4, then 1, and so forth. You get to go to all of them, okay? So you can grab a coffee and a cookie on the way. And we look forward to some great conversations.
Conversations. So first you are, yeah. Have you got everything you wanted?
Yes, thank you everybody. Fantastic. These are beautiful, wonderful conversations from the recorder. And I am really excited to see feedback from the other reporters, because there's a wealth of really useful and
well done. That was a really lovely exercise to do. Lots of participation from everybody. Okay, so now we're going to have a conversation with Siobhan and Michael. So I'm going to introduce Siobhan first and then Michael. I'll just so you all know Siobhan. The maker of the survey. Siobhan is a research to patient and now patient researcher. Siobhan was first diagnosed with primary breast cancer in May 2019. After finishing active treatment, which was surgery, chemotherapy, hormone therapy, radiotherapy in December 2019. Unfortunately, in October 2020, she was diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer. And she started to experience back pain and fatigue, and so decided to seek medical attention. Following this, she was put on targeted oral chemotherapy and continued treatment with hormone therapy. Siobhan is a scientist by profession, and she works in medicines, research and development, including in clinical trials, for over 30 years. Upon enforced medical retirement in 2022, she really struggled with the ideas of purpose and identity, and trying to figure out where to focus her limited energy and time. And she remembered a time when she was working in rare diseases, where she could see the impact of patients and parents on their own disease as inspiring and necessary. Most stage 4 cancers are currently incurable, although thanks to science and research, we are now living longer, and the challenge has moved to a much needed focus on quality of life. However, the scientific literature is very limited on understanding what we need and what we felt that a survey on a solid scientific footing with detailed patient input from stage 4 cancer patients was needed and soon. And that's what we have been focused on all morning this morning. So Siobhan, a big round of applause to you for making this happen. And then Michael, Dr. Michael McCarthy, thank you so much for travelling from Galway today. We really appreciate you being here. Michael is a consultant medical oncologist at University Hospital Galway, serving as medical oncology cancer MCAN group lead for the Northwest Hospital group. You said it's often called Mayo Clinic, is it? I like that. And you're an adjunct lecturer at the University of Galway. So Michael chairs the National Cancer Control Programme's Medical Oncology Leads Group, is a member of the HPRA's Advisory Committee for Human Medicines, and is the Secretary of the Irish Society of Medical Oncology. Michael holds an MSc degree in Integrated Immunology from the University of Oxford, in addition to a DPhil, which is a degree in research, a Master's in Research.
It's a PhD, what they call a PhD in English.
And funded by the Medical Research Council Training Research Award. So Michael is a member of the Irish Head and Neck Cancer Society's General Council. And Michael's clinical practice specialises in the treatment of gynae oncology, head and neck and endocrine cancers. So Michael, thank you so much for being here today. And we look forward to the conversation with yourself and Siobhan.
Right, so I'm going to kick it off and just echo Helen's thanks, really appreciate it. And for those of you who are unaware, Michael's current president of the Irish Society of Medical Oncology, and along with Dr. Michaela Higgins, who's the past president, they've already met the Advanced Cancer Council, so they are and continue to engage with us. So I think it's really important to understand they are actually listening to what we're saying and working on this. So firstly, I wanted to ask you, Michael, why did you choose oncology in medicine? Which is nice.
It's a good question. So I suppose that for me, there's Lynch syndrome, which runs in my family. So it's a group of inheritable mutations that affect DNA repair, and people that have Lynch syndrome are at risk of a wide range of cancers, most notably colorectal or gastrointestinal cancer. So when I was a teenager, kind of between the ages of 14 and 18, I had two uncles who seemed to me to be fully grown adults at the time, but actually were in their kind of late 30s, who died or diagnosed and died from colorectal cancer during a period where it was formative, I guess, for me, and just to see what was available for them at the time. That's what kind of sparked my interest. So I did a medical degree at the University College Cork, and I went on to do some postgraduate medical training in Ulster, and then went to Oxford to do masters. Started my specialist training in medical oncology here in Ireland, and went on to do the DPhil, and eventually finished the training and went up again to Galway.
Would you say that that is the story of a lot of oncologists, the personal life experience
I think probably, that there's, that it seems to be, there seems to be this kind of apocryphal tale that the specialist in an area is affected ultimately by their condition that they specialize in. So there probably is, in a lot of cases, a family background in medical problems or issues, and that's definitely the case in my situation. But I think that it's into the future, there's been probably not so much focus on workforce planning or career pathways to ensure that we're training the right people in the right areas so that we have enough people to deliver services at the right time. And there's some efforts now nationally to look at that, but I think it's a work in progress still.
So then, just want to talk specifically about advanced cancer. So, from your personal perspective, having all of this experience personally and professionally, what do you see in 2025 as the main challenges in treating advanced cancer patients in Ireland?
How long do we have? I think there's I guess from my I probably have a more blinkered perspective than you would, and focus my attention on the specific area if you like. But I think one of the areas, certainly in public practice, is access to new emerging treatments, and the process through which new cancer treatments become available to cancer patients in Ireland is long and is complex. But I think it's important. I think some work could be done around that to make sure that as we go forward, and it's a good problem to have in some sense, because there have been more improvements, more advances kind of globally in most types of cancer in the past 5 years than there have been in the last 30 years. And the pace of change is accelerating. And I guess that it's good that these treatments are becoming available or are being developed, but the challenges around how do we get access to these drugs quickly, to get the drugs to the right patients at the right time when they need it. And I guess you can probably well understand that, and everybody in the room can understand that, because people like cancer is something that's happening in real time to people right now.
We can't wait.
We can't wait 3 years for this drug to be approved, and so that's a big challenge. I think also in public practice there is an infrastructure challenge, and so we're lucky in Galway to recently have had a new consultant post approved, but there isn't any outpatient clinic space, and there isn't any desk space, like there's a real we need more physical infrastructure. We don't have enough chairs to put in our day boards to cope with the demand that's coming ahead. So there's an infrastructure challenge. There is a staffing challenge. I think there's a real, you can put those together into capacity, that we need. We can see if we look a little bit ahead that the demand for access to these services is rising. Not only because the treatments are getting better, people are living longer on treatment for longer periods of time, but increasingly, where in the past a course of treatment for a given type of cancer might have been 6 treatments in our day ward and then you're finished. Now with the immunotherapy, that's increasingly being replaced with 6 chemotherapies and a year of immunotherapy as the standard. So there's a real multiplicative effect on the demand for access to these spaces. I think that there's communication is a big problem. In Beaumont and St. James's, they're lucky enough to have a fully functional electronic healthcare record, which allows all doctors and nurses and staff in the hospital to be on the same page in your case at the same time. In a lot of hospitals, though, even communication with GPs, we're dependent on the postal service. And Martin back in 2004, when he was Minister for Health, announced that he had the funding secured for an electronic healthcare record just 21 years ago now. And the current digital health strategy from the HSE suggests that we might have a functional EHR by 2031, and I hope we do, but I'm always suspicious of promises that go beyond the lifetime of government, because when a new government comes in, the priorities can change. So I think those are probably some of the key challenges. But if there are specific areas that you'd like me to address, I'm trying to do so.
Okay, I'll keep going. So I know, for us, we're the recipient of the diagnosis, and then we've discussed it already earlier today. The question arises, how long do I get, doctor, or how long have I got left? Which is normal, and we all arrive at that point in time, and it's a scary question to even think about. What's it like from your perspective? How do you answer that question? Because as we've all discussed, there's a huge lack of data, right? That's what we spent the morning looking at was data. Why those answers? We understand better, I think, as patients, why it's a difficult, it's a complex answer. But how do you approach it currently in 2025? What's my prognosis, doc?
Well, so it's a question that I answer every day of the week, and what I start off by telling people is that whatever information you want, I'll do my best, but I get it wrong all of the time. For some people, I underestimate their prognosis. For some people, I overestimate the prognosis, and it's very something that's very difficult to predict on an individual level. And what we do have available is, or the best data that we have is looking at clinical trials where patients with a specific cancer who are starting on a treatment that was previously assessed in a clinical trial. In clinical trials under law, they're heavily regulated, so there's very good follow-up of the arms of each clinical trial that tell us how long people lived when they got this treatment. And so there's a few different ways you can read out that data. So you could say the number of people who were progression free at a year or 2 years. What most people want to know though is what's your life expectancy, and the best we can give is this extracting data from this population level, so we can see what we call the median overall survival in this patient group on the clinical trial, which means that if you take all the people that started the treatment, pick the one and line them up from the people who live the shortest amount of time to the longest time, and you can see how long the middle person in that group lived for, and that's the best we can do. But that inherently there's a widespread either side of that, and for any individual person, we don't know, we can't tell. There aren't tests. You might think there are tests we can do to be able to predict, how well you're going to respond to this treatment, or how long you're going to live, and they're just are not. And I find that people are very different, in terms of psychologically, in terms of how much information they want, how quickly. And there are some people who when I meet them first, psychologically, they can't continue with the process until they know every last detail, including how long we expect them to live. And there are other people who I think don't want to know. They specifically say, I don't want to know anything, tell me what to do. And I find that people, my general approach is to leave people at their own time to ask me what they want. So when somebody asks me when I meet them for the first time, how long do I have? What I usually say to them is, ask me the next time you see me, unless you really want to know. And I'd say maybe about 5 or 10% of people really want to know, so we go into the details. But I think that it's a lot of information for somebody to take on at one visit. I'm telling them about the diagnosis, what the scans showed, what the biopsy showed, what treatments are available, what are the likely benefits, what are the side effects, what are the practicalities. And I think for a lot of people, it can be very overwhelming, that first visit. I think that most people just need more time to process it. I'm sitting down with somebody for 45 minutes that I met for the first time, and it's difficult to package all that information in a way that is for a lot of people that is helpful or useful.
You've limited time, so that's the reality.
Oh yeah. So we typically I have 3 new patients scheduled to a 15-minute slot, and I've spoken to HSE many times to explain that there's only one way, but there's certain simple things that again you might think are easy to fix, but yeah, the time is limited, and But at the same time, it's important if somebody takes the time to come to see me out of their lives, that they at least sit down with them until your questions are answered. And sometimes that means that the clinic runs later than it should. But I think it's important. It's obviously a major moment in that person's life, whichever way you look at it.
So in terms of, treatments and, efficacy, do they work? Where do you see all of these new cancer treatments going generally? We have immunotherapy, and some of us, not so much in breast cancer and metastatic breast, but immunotherapy is the new hope in cancer. What would you see coming next after immunotherapy?
So I think with the immunotherapy, it has been transformative. Like, it's been the single biggest change to the single biggest development after chemotherapy was developed, and in different cancer types, there's different levels of effectiveness. So if you think about the original type of cancer, melanoma, which is a type of skin cancer, when I started training, when people were diagnosed with advanced melanoma, the only things we had available were chemotherapies, which really didn't work. And you'd see a patient and their cancer would progress just in front of your eyes, and there was nothing you could do about it. With immunotherapies for melanoma, they're very effective, and about 50% of patients with immunotherapy now are cured from the immunotherapy. And with the immunotherapy, I don't think, I think this is the start of the road and not the destination, because there's a few different categories of immunotherapy, but most of the drugs that we use and that have shown to be effective, they focus on one very specific part of the immune system. There's the protein that's expressed on cancer cells called PD-L1, that binds a receptor on immune cells called PD-1, and when cancer cells express the PD-1, it can switch off lymphocytes, and the current PD-1 targeted immunotherapies focus just on that system. But if you look at the broader context of different, what we call co-stimulating or co-inhibitory interactions that are known between lymphocytes or different subsets of immune cells, natural killer cells, NKT cells, CD4 cells, CD8 T cells, this PD-1, PD-L1 is one binding interaction of about another 50 or 60 that are known. And partly, I think that because this has been so successful in such a broad range of cancers, maybe it has to some extent slowed down the pace of innovation, but now we are starting to see other drugs being produced that target different parts of the immune system. And I think in the future, the other category is targeted targeted drugs that affect growth factor signal pathways in cells. But I think that into the future, the ways that we'll learn in terms of being able to manipulate the immune system to make it more likely to be effective at attacking cancer, I think we're only at the start of that. And I think as time goes on, we'll see different, hopefully better ways to manipulate the immune response. And it's one of the things that you think about, that the problems with chemotherapy are that the target of chemotherapy is a cell that's dividing quickly. There's different chemotherapies that disrupt different parts of the cell division pathway, and that's too broad a target in terms of trying to, like, we've reached the end of the road. Chemotherapy has taken us as far as we can, because our bodies are made up of perfectly healthy cells that need to divide and grow all the time and every day. And what you need is a more specific target, and preferably something that has a memory, so that you have a persistent response to the cancer, not just while you're getting the treatment. And I think the immune system ultimately is going to be the vehicle to get to cancer, to turn cancer into a condition that is more like a chronic disease that you live with, rather than something that we run out of treatments for eventually.
Thank you. So I think we've covered then, you know, what has happened and where we are and, you know, where the future is. And I think it's clear though that, you know, all of the new medicines and interventions will target less and less people in the sense that, you know, I worked in drug development in the 1990s. You talked about drugs that would affect millions of people. That's a big market. When you're developing drugs for 10, 20, 30 people, that's a different situation. So have you experienced the impact of that as we're getting more and more targeted and personalised, that complicates things from a commercial and from an efficacy perspective?
It definitely does, and so like one of the things that one of the big challenges in drug discovery development is identifying predictive biomarkers. So molecular tests that you can do that would identify, and you know, clinical trials for chemotherapies were originally divided along the lines of the cancer types. So breast cancer, colorectal cancer, you test your drug in that population, but increasingly we're the treatments are moving towards treatments that are more dependent on the biology of the cancer cells rather than the tissue in which it started. But you're right that in terms of because of the amount of data you would need to make a conclusion about smaller subsets of patients with a particular molecular profile, it means that it is more challenging to do because you have to, you know, whereas if before you wanted to run a clinical trial in chemotherapy and colorectal cancer, it's a common cancer and you can recruit lots of people to it. But now if it has to be colorectal cancer that has progressed after the previous immunotherapy and has a certain molecular profile, your pool of patients that would be eligible for this goes down. So, you know, into the future, most of the trials will be global multi-center randomized trials to be able to recruit the right patients in the trial quickly enough to make the results meaningful.
So now I'm going to move on to kind of supportive care, wraparound care, in terms of, you know, the non-tumour stuff, as I refer to, quality of life, living well with cancer. And first question I'm going to ask you is, in general, do you see advanced or cancer patients becoming more open to earlier palliative care referral for symptom support in your clinics?
I think so, and I think that, you know, there is more and more data emerging that when you know, I'd say that when I started out, if you go back 20 years, when we spoke about palliative care, it was for people who were nearing the end of life. But that has completely changed over the last 20 years. And there are now studies that demonstrate fairly conclusively that palliative care become involved early in somebody who has a diagnosis of cancer. It shows that people's quality of life is better, their symptoms are better controlled. In fact, they tolerate the treatments better and they live longer. And I think that there is like even today when I see people, I'd say particularly for older people, but in general, there is some sort of degree of stigma around the word palliative care, around the word hospice, and so when I'm talking to a patient about it for the first time, I every time I do have to kind of explain it and be clear that, you know, if palliative care are involved in a case, it won't affect the treatment decisions that we make for the cancer at all. And in fact that, you know, people who do have good palliative care support, they get on treatment better and they live longer. And I think that I have seen in the past 5 or 10 years that people are now kind of becoming more aware of this. And it's you know, there are some people, when I raise the topic, people say yes, please can I have it, and that stigma hasn't been part of their thinking before. But it is still, I think there's work to be done to broaden the coverage, and I think this is part of that. There would need to be more investment in staffing and infrastructure, you know, to get more outpatient palliative care services or bring palliative care services to RTA wards when people come in for cancer treatments. So there's to get where we want to be, I think we need more staff, more infrastructure. But I think things are changing pretty much.
I we all would agree with you, but what do you think in terms of the integration, better integration of palliative care with, medical oncology and radiation oncology and surgical oncology? Do you think we do a good job with that now, or could we do better in integrating those services?
That we could definitely do much better. So I guess the best clinic or the best organisation services that I've seen, certainly in Ireland, is our joint thoracic clinic in Galway. So that's they've a very well set up process. So if you go to your GP and there's a concern that you have lung cancer, your GP can get an appointment for you in the rapid access lung clinic, usually within a week or two. You go to the lung clinic and you can have your CT scan or ultrasound, your bronchoscopy, biopsies done all in one place. The results of those investigations are sent to the lung MDT, where the consultants that are involved in treating lung cancer sit around and discuss it and come up with a provisional treatment plan. Then the patient, if needs be, is invited back to this joint thoracic clinic. And in the clinic, you have 2 consultant oncologists, you have 2 consultant lung cancer surgeons, you have a radiation oncologist, and you've got a respiratory physician, all in the same clinic at the same time. So you can then you get your results, and whether you need surgery or radiation therapy or chemotherapy or systemic therapy, you can just go from room to room and see the right consultant all in one minute. And in that situation, it would be great if also we had more space so that you could have a palliative care consultant there, or a psychologist there, or social worker, or other supportive people in the building. There are challenges in delivering that, but I think it would be great to have a palliative care available in space like that.
And do you think we're missing truth with our nursing colleagues, with fantastic AMTs and very senior nurses in the system that are really well educated? Do you think we're missing a trick there in terms of them helping delivering some of these services and expanding these services?
I think we are, and I think that it's not just there's certainly nurses and advanced practitioners, but also I think our pharmacists, for example, have great expertise, and a lot of people maybe don't realise how much of the quality control in terms of delivering the right dose and the right treatment at the right time is dependent on pharmacists, for example. And I think there is role to expand the practice of a range of healthcare professionals to get them involved earlier at the right time. I guess one of the challenges, though, again, is getting those posts funded. In Galway, we have 1 advanced nurse practitioner for the whole hospital, and I think there are definitely roles for advanced nurse practitioners, and to reorganise the services in a way that is more towards what patients need rather than what's convenient for the hospital management.
I think we all recognise as well that those of us who are privileged to have nursing looking after us, in terms of clinics, etc., that the nurses have more time as well.
Yeah, and the nurses are often much better communicators, and they often, because also they're permanent staff members as opposed to junior doctors who rotate through the hospitals. They have this institutional memory, and currently, in terms when I think of our nursing staff in Galway, I don't think we're getting the most out of them, because we haven't built the posts and the promotional posts for them to grow into. And there's something being lost, and it's a big challenge in terms of the funding and governance to change these things. But I think you're on the right track, suggesting that. Because often, like what somebody needs is time, not just to be, have a gush of information in 30 minutes. It's hard to digest, and people need time to process and think about this.
So I know we've spoken before, Michael, about having a dedicated advanced cancer clinic, and we were talking about it this morning, what that looked like. We even have come up with some concepts, and we get an input people about what that might or should look like, whether it's real or not, or virtual, or what would your thoughts be on an advanced cancer clinic concept to work in your service?
I think that if you had a magic wand and could introduce it in the morning, I think it'd be great, because when I have my clinic, it's me in a room with the nurse specialist, for several hours, and often when I see somebody, their plan for treatment for management would be dependent on a decision that a radiation oncologist needs to make, or another healthcare professional needs to make, and so we come up with a partial or provisional plan pending their next appointment next week with somebody else. And I think that with the caveat that, you know, for some people, getting too much information too quickly can be overwhelming. But if we could solve the problems that we need for patients in real time, so that you come and you get a clear plan and all the signposts you need to access the relevant services that you might require. I think that would be a much better way to organise the healthcare services. I think that there are challenges in terms of the infrastructure you need to fit that many people in one space at one time. And I guess the other thing is that increasingly, when I started out, medical oncology was a general practice almost. So every consultant would see every type of cancer. But because of the amount of progress that has been made in research, and because things are changing very quickly, it's over the past 20 years or so, it's very much become a subspecialized, both in radiotherapy and in medical oncology, and certainly in surgery. They're all subspecialized areas of practice. So I guess the challenge would be to have you need an advanced clinic for each of the cancer types, I think, and in terms of the resourcing required to staff that with people like, for example, palliative care, and all of these advanced cancer clinics, that's a challenge. But if it could be done, I think it would be great. I think it would be a big step forward in how we treat cancer patients through their cancer journey.
So final question, I know we're running a little bit late, but one doesn't mind. So I think, as you know, when you've worked with us, we've established Advanced Cancer Patient Council, which will always need new volunteers and new members. And our main target is obviously to influence the next national cancer policy. And in particular, we're asking for a focus on advanced cancer, which is not there, as you know, in the current policy for various reasons. What would your advice be? You understand better medical politics in terms of influencing policy changes as a patient council. You know, what pieces of advice could you offer us?
Well, since Joe, if you're tired, I think it's become a lot more challenging. I mean, I think it's important that I can, so from my experience, and I work with the NCP and the Irish Society of Medical Oncology, it is very difficult to deliver change from within the system, and I think that most of the things, there's some changes you can deliver by working with the resources you already have, and by trying to maximize efficiency with how you deliver what you have available to you. But to get new funding for new innovative ideas, it always comes to it comes down to what is in the cancer strategy. I think there is some uncertainty at the minute as to what the new cancer strategy will look like and how it's going to be developed and who's going to be involved with it. But I think that in my experience, the biggest steps forward in terms of how cancer services are arranged in Ireland in the past 10 years have been when patients step up and say, hang on a second, this is public money. You're not addressing our needs with the things you're suggesting that happen. And I think that that patient voice, trying to harness it, because it's really difficult, because these are people who are vulnerable, who are sick, who might not feel well enough to come to the meeting today because they're getting treatment. And how you can pull that together and come up with a shared purpose or a shared idea of how you would like this to be spent. That's a big challenge for you. But I think it's very worthwhile, because you know, the HSE won't listen to me on a lot of things, but they do listen to patients, and and you'd be surprised if you could see underneath the hood of how hospital is managed, just what lengths the hospital goes to respond to patient requests for extra support or to fix the problem with employment. There's a whole army of people there underneath the surface trying to respond locally. And I think if you can draw together a clear plan, the National Cancer Strategy is a place to get it. And because the National Cancer Control Programme is there to implement the National Cancer Strategy, and that's the template they work off for the 9 or 10 year period. Now the budget they get to do that is allocated currently on an ad hoc basis from year to year after the general budget. Some years they get 20 million to implement the strategy, some years they get no money at all. And it'd be great if we could fix that as well. But I think that the National Cancer Strategy is the vehicle that will influence the policy, and we don't know who's going to be chairing it yet. But I'll pass on your contact details to whoever it is once it's finished. But I think the work you're doing here, and it's great to see in the room such a big turnout, because like you mightn't think that I can imagine having cancer is a place of kind of uncertainty and doubt, and that you mightn't think you have the power to change things, but I really think that together there's more power to change the system than there is in the National Cancer Control Programme or the Department of Health, or bound by funding limits and things like that. But if there's a big enough case made by patients, suddenly somebody finds money from somewhere to implement change. So I think congratulations on the work you're doing, and hopefully you can hopefully you can keep it, get it over the line for the next cancer strategy. And once it's in the strategy as a line, then the NCP automatically comes along and will pick it up over time. So
It's very heartening to hear, and thank you. So finally, final question, anything else you'd like to let us know as a group of advanced cancer patients?
No, I probably ended on a note of optimism that despite the challenges and despite how much giving out I do, like the future does look bright in terms of what I can see coming down the track in terms of the research and the and drug development. And for you were talking about prognosis a minute ago, and when I'm talking to people about prognosis, and I mentioned that we look at the clinical trials to see how well people did on the trial. We also have to bear in mind that those trials started maybe 6, 7, 8 years ago, and now, as we can see, new drugs and new therapies and new immunotherapies coming down the track. Although I might give you the average for 6 years ago, like your average today might be a lot longer than that. And I think that there is optimism ahead. We just need to try and find out how to funnel that and get it to the right people at the right time. And I think you're a role model for people in this sector in terms of the work you put in week after week and year after year. And I think that, and I think it's really important. So
thank you. So doctors and patients together.
There's lots of great positive vibes there and empowerment. And I like to say, Michael, because you talked about 20 years ago. We had Francis and John on stage earlier on, and Francis will be 20 years diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer in December of this year. So that's a big celebration, and things have moved on hugely, even from listening to Francis' story earlier on. Medicine is moving on at a rapid pace. And science. How could I not be talking about science? So thank you both very much for that. I know we're running a little bit behind time now, so I'm going to invite Liz, our CEO, to the stage to say a few thank yous. Liz, I'll just say a few words about it first. Is that okay? I'll say a few words about you. So Liz is also a cancer survivor herself. I know we didn't like that word today, but it's one we have to use because it's the one that's nationally recognised and internationally recognised. Liz was diagnosed with breast cancer in October 2012, and following her treatment, she joined the Marie Keating Foundation in 2014. As Director of Public Affairs, and then was promoted to CEO in March 2015. And over those 11 years, we have been led into a transformation program to enhance the impact of the foundation as one of Ireland's leading voices in cancer awareness and support services. So we're all, as a team, very proud of that and very proud of your leadership, Liz, so thank you for that. And another thing I'd like to add is that in 2018, Liz co-founded the 2-to-1 Plus cervical check group for women who are very badly affected, by the cervical check battle. So that's a huge kudos. Liz is chairperson and board member of 2-to-1 Plus, and we support that in every way we can as a foundation. And Liz is also a board member of Advocacy, which is the Irish platform for patient organisations in science and industry, in February 2023. So doing a great job, and Liz is going to close off our session for today. And then we're going to dance.
And I think I'll close on that very optimistic note that Michael and Siobhan left us with. We've had an absolutely uplifting day today. We've learned so much. As Helen said earlier, the mission of the Marie Keating Foundation is to make cancer less frightening by enlightening. And one might consider that, to attend a seminar on advanced cancer could be, a difficult day. There are vulnerable people in the room, there are family members who are very concerned. But actually, I think we're all coming away very better informed, very much enlightened, very much uplifted, and positive for the future. And I want to thank a lot of people. I think everybody who contributed to today's session. So thank you, Claire, from the NCCP. I know we had also representatives from the Department of Health who were listening very closely as well, and particularly in relation to our policy asks. Thank you to Anne and Samantha from Roaches, and to our friends from Bodygo as well. Thank you to our sponsors, so our pharma partners, and this is the 10th year of this seminar on Metastatic Breast Cancer Awareness Day. And our pharma partners have sponsored us throughout those 10 years. And it really is our privilege as the Marie Keating Foundation to support this community, which is growing every year. And it's not just breast cancer anymore. We welcome within our community members with melanoma, with lung cancer, with colorectal cancers. As was said today, everybody is in a similar boat, regardless of what type of cancer you have. When it's stage 4, you're all living a similar, you get each other's tribes, I guess. And I just would like to really applaud the whole community. I think we heard from Siobhan and Eimear just in relation to the study that was done on the unmet needs of patients with advanced cancer, and how it's really, it's actually hard to believe that there isn't more in place. So as Marie Keating Foundation, we're delighted to obviously continue positive living, and we will continue to grow that community. But I think we're also a respected voice, and now with Kathy, our Director of Public Affairs, we're beginning to take on more of an advocacy voice as well. And certainly in terms of our partnership with the National Cancer Control Programme and Helen's leadership within that Survivorship Alliance, much as we don't like the word survivorship, we will continue to advocate for your needs and ensure that the advanced cancer community needs are met. And it's a year and a half before the next strategy is compiled. I think you are well ready with your with what you need. And I think it is, you know, I think the powerhouses that you are, with our support, with the support of other patient organisations, the Irish Cancer Society, let's ensure that those priorities are front and centre within the National Cancer Strategy. And we will do our utmost to ensure that support is there for you. I would like to just finish to thank our own team. So Jane, Kathy, Fiona, thank you all so much for helping to organise today's event and for making it such a success. Delighted to invite Melanie Strickland, who was one of our community nurses, went back to clinical practice for a while and has now rejoined as a new community nurse with the foundation. And Laura, I think is she here, still here? Laura has just recently joined our nursing team as well, so delighted to have you here. Welcome to the Marie Keating Foundation team. And family, and this positive living group is very much a family. We feel very privileged to have a special place for you. As Helen said earlier, we are with you at every step. So whether you're just newly diagnosed, whether you're going through active treatment, whether you've come out the other side, or whether you're living with and beyond cancer, we're here for you and our services will align to you. We are just about to launch a new strategic plan within the foundation. So from 2026 to 2028, and I can assure you the needs of the metastatic cancer community will be very much front and centre of our strategic plan. So thank you to Helen. Helen, as you know, is the powerhouse of our positive living group. She's our director of nursing. So proud to Helen and I started within a month of each other back in 2014. We did one Survive and Thrive programme for the positive living community. And then we realised, no, you can't just finish after 6 weeks. So hence positive living has been living ever since. We very much recognise that the needs of the advanced community are very different to those who have come through a journey. So Helen, thanks to you. It's a pleasure to continue working with you. And I'll let you announce about the silent dancing because I've never been.
There's another couple of things. I'd like to thank the hotel, Lynn and her team as well. They have been fantastic. We've had everything we needed here, apart from the heating this morning. We got over that. And Paul here as well. So Paul is our expert. Like we've had a great day today because we haven't had to worry about technology so much. It's always such a difficult thing when it goes wrong, and we all panic. We panic today. So Carl, thank you for what you've done for us today. And you're going to lead us into a nice silent disco. But before we do that, we're going to get into the mood. And we have a song to play and it's karaoke. I know when you get that bit of karaoke, so you might come up here.